The Red Book. One day, a girl called Gemma was walking home from school with her friends. It was a very windy day in autumn. Gemma and her friends walked through piles of leaves. The leaves made a lovely sound, but then the wind got stronger. The wind pushed Gemma and her friends, and they could only walk slowly, and they felt cold. Gemma's friends decided to run home where it was warm, but Gemma liked the wind, so she did not run. Gemma liked the wind because it played with her hair, and everything looked different in the wind. The trees danced, the leaves flew through the sky like birds. Sometimes the wind was very strong, and Gemma thought she might fly as well. Gemma was almost home, but then she saw something in a pile of leaves. At first, she thought it was a very red leaf, but then she saw that it was square, and she had never seen a square leaf before. She pushed away the leaves and saw the square thing was a red book. Strange, thought Gemma. Why would someone leave a book in a pile of leaves? It hadn't been there long because it wasn't wet. Someone had wrapped the book in leaves. Maybe they wanted to keep it dry, but it would get wet soon if someone didn't take it. So Gemma picked up the book and put it in her bag. Maybe it belonged to someone at school, and she could give it back. That night there was a big storm. The storm pushed down trees and pulled roofs off houses. Some of the trees fell on the roads and the railways. It was too hard for people to travel the next day, so there was no school. Gemma sat at home bored. Her parents had to work, so they couldn't talk to her. And her brother's school was close to their house, so he had walked to school. Gemma was alone and had nothing to do, so she opened the red book. She thought it might be an interesting book with lots of pictures, but she saw it was a long book with lots of words. Still, she had nothing better to do, so she started reading. The story went like this. Once there was a little boy called Nye who lived on a boat. He traveled with his father, who sold treasure from the boat. That was nice, Gemma thought. She liked stories with treasure. She kept reading. Nye's father found his treasure in the sea. He dived into the deep blue water and found all kinds of treasures. Jewelry, old furniture, money. He cleaned them and sold them in the cities they visited, and he told people that the treasures were magic. Gemma closed her eyes and sighed. She wanted to live on a boat too. She was sure she would find strange, exciting treasures, not just red books. She kept reading. One day, Nye's father dived into the sea and brought back a red book. It was wrapped in plastic so it didn't get wet. Hey, that's strange, thought Gemma. What was it her teacher had said? Fact is stranger than fiction. It means that real things, facts, were stranger than stories. Fiction, and it was true. She had found a red book wrapped in leaves, and there was a story in the book about a man who had found a red book wrapped in plastic. That was very strange. She kept reading. Nye didn't know how to read because he had grown up on a boat, but he really wanted to know what was in the red book. It had to be a very special treasure because you had to learn to read to understand it. Nye's father didn't care about the book and wanted to sell it, but the boy cried and told his father he really wanted to learn to read so he could read the book. Nisa said, "Fine, it probably won't sell for much. Who wants books?" And he dived into the water to find more treasure. For years, Nye looked at the book every night. He touched the words, tried to understand them, but he couldn't teach himself to read. Sometimes when they were in a city, He asked other children to read the words to him. He didn't know if they were correct or not, but he remembered which words were which. And at night, he said the words to himself. Nye knew what most of the words meant, leaf and wind. But there were also words he didn't know, like, Gemma, you all right, honey? Gemma jumped off her chair. It was her mother. I brought you a cup of tea, said Gemma's mother. What are you reading? Oh, just a book I got from the school library, said Gemma. Is it scary? You jumped when I came in. Gemma laughed and closed the book a bit. Well, you keep on reading. It's great to see you're interested in books. Gemma's mother left and Gemma kept reading, forgetting about her cup of tea. When Nye grew older, he saw that all the other children knew how to read. He asked if he could stay in a city for a while and learn to read, but his father always said no. I need you, Nye. I'm growing old, and soon I won't be able to dive myself. But Nye didn't want to dive for treasures until he was old. He found the treasures so boring now because he saw all the interesting things that people in the cities could do. So one night he wrapped the red book in its plastic and ran away into one of the cities. For months, Nye tried to learn to read, but living in the city was much harder than he thought. He was big now, and adults didn't like him. Nobody wanted to take him inside when it rained, and he had no treasures to sell for food. And when he told people he wanted to learn to read, they looked at him and laughed. But Nye never lost the book. Sometimes people asked to buy the book from him, but he wouldn't sell it. The red book was more important than food. When it rained, he wrapped the book in plastic. He could get wet, but the book had to stay dry. One day, Nye met an old woman who had bought an old library. This place is full of treasures, she said. Beautiful old books, but they're old and wet, and they need help. Help? Will you work here and help me look after these books? Of course, said Nye. He couldn't read, but he wanted to work with books, and he worked hard. He moved the books and cleaned the library. When the books were dry, he put them on the shelves. The old woman said that Nye did a good job, and she paid him well. She was interested in his red book, but she never asked to see it. When the old woman learned that Nye couldn't read, she said, I'm going to teach you. I don't care how long it takes. Everyone should be able to read. And so, morning and night, the old woman sat with Nye and taught him to read. At first, they were only simple stories for children, but he learned quickly, and soon he was reading beautiful stories for adults. They really were treasures. There were so many beautiful stories in the world, so many lives that N didn't know about before. Sometimes he read stories that were like his life, and sometimes he read stories that were completely different to his life. But Nye was sad. I couldn't read for so many years, he said. There are so many books I want to read, but I'll never have the time. There is always time, said the old woman, and every time someone reads a story, it's new. You read the words in the book, but you draw a picture in your head. So you have drawn pictures that no other people could draw. Nye didn't agree with her, but he said nothing. This woman had given him everything. When Nye was ready, he opened the red book. Gemma's dad was calling from upstairs. Gemma didn't listen. She had to finish this story. She had to know what happened. The story went like this. One day, a girl called Gemma was walking home from school with her friends. It was a very windy day in autumn. Gemma and her friends walked through piles of leaves. The leaves made a lovely sound. But then the wind got stronger. Gemma gasped. The story was telling exactly what had happened to her yesterday. Gemma, called Dad more loudly, I need your help. Come up here. Gemma didn't hear him. She kept reading, moving quickly. The story talked about finding the red book in the pile of leaves, bringing it home, and so Gemma opened the red book. She thought it might be an interesting book with lots of pictures, but she saw it was a long book with lots of words. But she had nothing better to do, so she started reading. The story went like this. N yawned. What time was it? He had been reading for hours, not moving. The story was quite scary, and he always had to finish scary stories. If he didn't finish the story, he couldn't sleep. But he had finished now. He closed the red book, got up, and went upstairs. So sorry, Dad. What did you want help with? Said Dad. But don't worry, I did it myself, honestly. You really don't like helping your father, do you? Sorry, said Nye, I was reading. I know, said Dad. You're always reading. I'm going to bed now. Do you think school will be open tomorrow? Oh, I don't think so. That storm was so bad. Ah, Dad laughed. Most children don't want to go to school, you know. I know, but I want to get some books from the school library. Well, we can walk to the town library if you want. It's good to do some exercise. Actually, we could go swimming if you want. Boring. I hate swimming. Nye went to bed. He lay down and thought about the book he'd read. It was about a girl called Gemma who lived in a library with an old woman. Gemma had worked in the library for years, but she still didn't know how to read. She hated all the books and wanted to run away and dive into the sea. What a scary idea. If Nye couldn't read, his life would be terrible. So he fell asleep very happy, knowing that in this world he could read all the books he wanted, The Path of Pins and Needles. Once upon a time there was a young girl with hair as red as blood. Such hair was rare in those times when the sun hardly rose and strong winds blew day and night. The girl was known as Red, and as a child she was loved by all in her village. But as Red grew older, she grew bolder and began to sneak around and play tricks. She was long past the age when adults would tickle her and call her sweet names, and so her tricks were not welcomed by the villagers. One day, Red's mother, sick of her games, sent her to visit her grandmother. You know, the old fool lives up on that cliff where no one can get to her easily. She thinks she'll live forever, huh? She has a nasty cold now and wants us to bring her bread and milk. So I'm sending you with a basket. But do not spill a drop of this milk and don't even touch this bread, understand? And if grandmother does not finish them, then bring them back as they are. I won't have you wasting precious food. Yes, Mother, said Red, playing with her hair. Red's mother had spent so much time telling her about the food that she forgot to explain the path. Red had traveled to grandmother's house as a young girl, but that was back when they had a horse and cart, when the days and nights were not so dark. Now, as she walked through the forest, she felt like the trees themselves might eat her up. So she did not walk. She sneaked, hoping that it might keep her safe. A few hours later, Red reached a crossroads where the path split in two. She could not remember which way to go, but just as she was considering it, she heard a familiar voice. Ah, if it isn't our fiery little Red. She turned around. It was Wolf, a man who lived in the forest just outside of the village. He had long, thick hair and a beard that covered his mouth. He must have been poor because he was as thin as a stick and had no shoes. Red had heard all kinds of whispers about Wolf, and her mother told her to stay away from him. So naturally she was curious. "Hello, Wolf," she said. "What a surprise to see you here." "You've strayed quite far from the path," said Wolf. "Ah, but straying from the path is one of the simple pleasures in life. I simply sought some peace and quiet. And why, may I ask, have you strayed so far?" There was a light in Wolf's eyes, the same light that shone in Red's whenever she was about to play a trick. She liked this man. "I'm not straying at all," she said playfully. "I'm heading to grandmother's house to deliver her bread and milk." "See how sweet you are," said Wolf, but he did not smile. "And tell me, do you know what these two paths are called?" "I don't," said Red, feeling slightly uncomfortable. Wolf's eyes told stories of hunger. They were all hungry in those times when the ground froze over every winter, but he did not stare at the food, but at her. "Why, this is the path of pins, and that is the path of needles." He pointed to the paths and took a step closer. "You can't walk both, or you'll get pins and needles." Without warning, he reached for her sides and tickled her. Red laughed so hard that she dropped her basket of food. "Stop! Stop!" she cried. "Let her go," said Wolf, and his smile was wider than the seven seas. Despite the frosty air, Red felt hot. "Both paths lead to your grandmother's house, but I must say I have no idea which is quicker. Why don't we play a little game? We'll each take a different path, and we'll see who gets there first." "And what does the winner get?" said Red suspiciously. She wanted to ask what happened to the loser, but that was the kind of question that made her mother hit her with a wooden spoon. "Oh, I think the best prize is always learning something new. Now, why don't you take the path of pins? If I remember correctly, it's much safer, better for a young girl like you." Red, who never liked taking the safe option, said, "No, I think I'll take the path of needles." "Ah, a fiery young thing you are," said Wolf. "Wonderful. Follow the path of needles, I'll take the pins, and we'll see who gets to grandmother's house first." So Red set off along the path. As she walked, the forest grew thicker, and the trees changed to pines. Pine needles covered the ground, giving off a delicious smell but making it hard to tell where she was going. Red had to walk slowly and look carefully to make sure she didn't stray from the path. Worse than that, as she came closer to her grandmother's house, there were many rocks and cliffs she had to climb to keep going. Pulling on roots to keep her balance, while the path certainly did lead to her grandmother's house, it was not direct at all, and it started to get dark before she could even see the house. Meanwhile, Wolf quickly made his way along the path of pins. The path was named so because of the sharp rocks that made it hard to walk on. But Wolf was used to walking without shoes, and so he did not cut his feet on the rocks. When he came to the grandmother's house, a little fire was blowing smoke through the chimney, but otherwise, all was quiet. Wolf found himself a comfortable spot between some trees and waited for night to come as the full moon sat fat in the sky. Red finally reached her grandmother's house. She knocked on the door. "Grandmother, it's Red. I've come to bring you food. Come and open the door." "Come in, dear," cried a rough voice. "The door is open." Red's grandmother sounded different from how she remembered, but it had been years since they'd last made the journey here, and the old woman was sick after all. Red was tired and frustrated after her journey, and Wolf was nowhere to be seen. She was sure the man had played a trick on her, one of those awful jokes that adults like to play on children. After all, he had tickled her like a stupid child. Now she would have to spend the night with her sick grandmother, hungry and bored. So when Red came in and saw a plate of meat and a cup of wine on the table, she was very pleased indeed. "Oh, grandmother, is this for me?" "Yes, dear," said the old woman, who was lying under a mountain of blankets in bed. "Go eat and drink." The fire was almost dead, and Red thought she should go put some wood on it, but her hunger got the better of her. She put down the basket and sat down to eat. It had been weeks since she'd had real meat, and Mother never usually let her have wine, so she wolfed it down. But as she finished the food, her stomach ached a little. Hadn't that meat tasted a little strange? And wasn't that wine much thicker than the kind her parents drank? Suddenly, Red felt very cold and tired, and she wanted very much to lie down. As if reading her mind, her grandmother said, "Oh, my poor child, you look exhausted after your journey. I wish I could offer you a warm fire, but I'm afraid I have run out of wood. Perhaps you could burn your clothes. I have a thick traveler's coat in the cupboard, which you could wear to travel back tomorrow." "Mother will be furious if I burn my clothes," said Red. Here's the corrected text with proper punctuation. "So I think it's an excellent idea." Red pulled off her coat, her shirt, and her trousers and threw them onto the fire. She laughed as the flames eagerly ate them up, and the room filled with warmth and light. Now Red could see better, and she noticed that her grandmother was looking very strange. She had her hat on in bed, and the blankets covered almost her entire face. But from what she could see, the old woman was much hairier than she remembered. As if sensing her fear, her grandmother said, "Come join me in bed, child, and warm up your old grandmother. Otherwise, I fear I may not survive the night." "But grandmother," said Red, her curiosity got the better of her, "what big hands you have." "All the better to tickle you with, my dear," said her grandmother. "But grandmother," said Red, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear," said her grandmother. "But grandmother," said Red, "what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with, my dear," said her grandmother. "But grandmother," said Red, "what big arms you have." "All the better to hug you with, my dear," said her grandmother. "And grandmother, what a big mouth you have." Grandmother chuckled. "All the better to kiss you with, my dear, and I would love so much to kiss my dear sweet grandchild." The old woman's hand reached out and grabbed Red's leg. Red was so scared that she lost control and wet herself. "Oh, grandmother," said Red, tears in her eyes, "I have wet myself. Please let me go out and wash myself in the stream." "Not now, girl," said grandmother. "You only want to run away, don't you? You want to leave your grandmother to die." Red's grandmother tightened her grip so that her sharp nails pressed into Red's leg. "No," said Red, "I would never do that." She felt sick. "Please, I don't want to get into bed." "Fine, but I will tie a rope around you to make sure you do not run away." Grandmother's grip was too tight for Red to stop her, so she waited while the old woman tied a knot around her. Then Red walked out of the house and towards the stream outside. The full moon shone brightly, and she saw that it was no ordinary rope tied around her waist, but a rope of intestines. Red threw up in the river, but she did not wash herself. She did not have time. Before the wolf could pull on the rope, Red untied the intestines and tied them around a pine tree. Then she ran back down the path of pins, the rocks stabbing her feet with every step. When the wolf realized what had happened, sunrise was approaching and it was too late. He howled with rage ate the intestines, and burned down the house. When morning came, Red arrived home in the bitter cold of morning, tears frozen to her cheeks. She had pins and needles in her feet from where the rocks had stabbed her, and that feeling would never go away. Red told her mother what had happened, but her mother did not believe her. Still, they did not hear from Red's grandmother after that, and when they found out that the house had burned down, Red's mother said, "What a waste! That wood could have been used to feed a nice fire, and I'm sure she had gold hidden in there." From that day on, Red did not play tricks on the adults as she had before. She did not sneak around, and she never strayed from the path. She did not wet herself as children do, nor did she laugh and cry or stop to gaze at the full moon. For Red was an adult now, and adults see only what they want to.